Mr. President, this afternoon I come to the floor to pay tribute to an exemplary soldier and an outstanding young man. Marine Lance Corporal Andy Nowacki from South Euclid, Ohio, was killed in Iraq when a roadside bomb struck his Humvee on the afternoon of February 26, 2005, just south of Baghdad. He was 24 years old. Andy, to his family and friends, served the public and protected the peace in two nations separated by time, distance, and circumstances. As a police officer with the Grand River Police Department in Ohio, and as a Marine serving in Iraq, Andy dedicated his life to helping his fellow man. It was his calling, and he was remarkably good at it. Andy was in harm's way on that Saturday afternoon in February precisely because he had earned the trust and respect of his fellow Marines. Andy's commanding officer, Sergeant Paul A. Shook, explained in a letter to Andy's parents. I would like to quote, "I picked Andy to be my gunner. Andy's job was very difficult compared to that of other gunners because he was more exposed than most of them. I needed someone I could trust, who wouldn't hesitate at any moment to offer the protection we needed. Andy was that Marine. I felt very safe having him watching over me, and I never questioned his judgment. I thank God that Andy was in my life and for the rare privilege to have put my safety in his hands." Mr. President, it's been said that challenges don't build character, but rather that they reveal it. This certainly was the case for Andy. Andy's character was forged in Ohio with the love and support of his family. The challenges he faced abroad in Iraq simply revealed the core of this courageous, loving, and above all, joyful young man. Andy was the youngest of three boys. His parents, Sheila and Denis Nowacki, raised him to honor God and country through his actions. Even as a small child, Andy demonstrated selfless concern for the welfare of others. As his mother, Sheila, remembers, and I quote, "Even as a kid, he never cared what he got for Christmas. He was happier picking the perfect gift for other people." His father, Denis, recalls that Andy followed a simple rule: try and do something kind for someone else every single day. Always smiling, always happy, full of his totally original sense of humor, Andy inspired family and friends. He lived life joyfully, and that joy was contagious. Andy graduated from Brush High School in Lyndhurst, Ohio in 1998 and enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserves the next fall. Andy's first experience in the Marines prepared him for the next chapter in his life, his time as a police officer. Andy wanted to work in law enforcement so that he could help others. And as Andy's older brother Nathan remembers, and I quote, "He told me he had become a police officer to reward the good and punish the bad." In 2000, Andy joined the Grand Rivers Police Department. He worked 3 years as one of the 31 Grand River officers, and during that time he became part of a brotherhood that would never forget him. Andy's work as a police officer required empathy and compassion, something that Andy had in spades. Robert Antonelli, the Grand River's chief of police and the man who hired Andy, reflected on what really made Andy so good at his job. And this is what he said. Let me quote. "Every time he had to work the road, Andy would treat every call as unique. He was able to adjust to help a little girl or help a child off a school bus or handle a domestic violence situation. The outcome would always be positive. He could be passionate when he had to be. If he had to put the law down, he put the law down. But he always put that smile on his face. I'm honored that he was part of the family that we have here. Only a policeman understands about other policemen. We're brothers in blue. He was family to us. Andy's dad remembers the way that Andy thought of his job. And I quote, "He thought it wasn't his job to hurt people. It was his job to educate. He was a man's man and a cop's cop. He delivered the courage of his convictions." Mr. President, Andy was an avid outdoorsman and animal lover. Andy loved to work on bike patrol. Outside, close to the people he was serving, Andy had the opportunity to touch the lives of so many in his small village of 345 people. He loved the weekly dinners at Chief Antonelli's house. He loved working with his brothers in blue. In the village hall in Grand River, which houses the police station, today a display celebrates Andy's service. His silver police badge, number 15, still gleams alongside his starched uniform hat and still crisp bike patrol t-shirt and dozens of photographs. Now, Mr. President, by 2003, as the conflict in Iraq escalated, Andy, again compelled by his compassion for others, answered the Marines' call to serve. Andy was in Iraq for 9 months in 2003 and returned in September 2004 when his obligation to the reserves was almost over. During his first 6 months in Iraq, he had already suffered injuries to his right arm after a truck he was riding in suddenly blew up. But in spite of his experiences and his injuries, the images that he brought back from the war zone were those of life, not death. His mother remembers that, and I quote, "Andy was one of the most joyful people. He was an animal lover. Many of the pictures that he brought back from Iraq were of children and others of animals." One picture in particular captures the very essence of Andy and what he brought to that troubled part of the world. In the picture, Andy is smiling that charming boyish smile with his arms around two young Iraqi children. And when you look at the picture, Mr. President, you can see the admiration that these children felt toward him. Again, Andy was making a difference on that most basic human level. Andy's father said that he will forever cherish that particular photograph. Andy's dad said, "That's what Andy really was all about." In spite of all the violence that Andy saw firsthand, he remained committed to being in Iraq as long as he was needed. His mother explained, and I want to quote now, "He'd been in Iraq more than he'd been home the last 2 years. But he really was okay with being over there because he saw the oppression and the cruelty that had happened to the people there. His heart went out to the Iraqi people and the deplorable conditions that they lived in. He thought a lot of the Iraqi people, and he was willing to go back because he thought we were doing so much good."